Hello, I'm Christopher Walker with Closely Observed Literature. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Erewhon by Samuel Butler. So, this was written in 1872, right at the start of Butler's career as a writer. He'd been out to New Zealand and was kind of doing some journalistic writing out there and was coming up with these kind of satirical essays. Didn't really know what to do with them, so he repackaged them as a kind of imaginary travel writing book, which is actually a problem, as I'll discuss in a minute. Now, this is my second Butler. I read The Way of All Flesh years ago when I was traveling through Africa. I picked up a hardback secondhand in an antiquarian's in Swakopmund in Namibia, of all places. And I read it and I was engrossed right from the first. I didn't expect the book would be much good, but I loved every word really. But that was written in 1903, so that's quite a lot later in his career, and again that sort of tells. So, what is Erewhon about? Well, the title itself is an anagram for nowhere. So the idea is that the main character is out, rearing sheep. He's an ambitious young man. He sees past the mountains into the hinterland of the country and he thinks, there is where my fortune lies. But there's no way for him to get there. The one guide to the area, who says that he comes from the hinterlands originally, he doesn't want to go that way. He's scared. So eventually the main character gets through this kind of crevasse or something, a series of misadventures, and he lands in this kind of new world. He meets these statues. He sees these statues and they're so kind of grotesque and so fearsome that he passes out in fear and fright. And now that I think about it, I don't remember him actually explaining why they were there. I think that might have been the first sign that there's trouble brewing in this book, because there's not very much in the way of plot. So this character, the main character, Higgs, discovers the Erewhonians, these people, and they seem very backward. They seem like they do things weirdly compared to how Europeans do, and that's the whole point. In a series of chapters, we learn more about Erewhonian civilization and the rules that they follow, and everything is basically like the West, either in reverse or anagrammatically, with subtle shifts. So, for example, you are a criminal in Erewhon if you're sick. You might think, well, you don't have any choice about being sick, but some people actually think you don't have much choice about being a criminal, given all of the impacts, the effects of society that lead to people being criminals, their background, maybe even their predisposition. You have all of these theories, especially around this sort of time. So if you actually steal money from people, you're treated as if that was an illness. But if you come down with something like measles and malaria, you're shipped off to a prison, essentially. And the prison is not where sick people tend to recover. So that was one aspect. Then they had the whole, they switched capitalism and religion. So they have these so-called kind of musical banks that you go to where you actually pay money in, and it's supposed to be beneficial for your soul, but it's a dual currency. There's a real currency that people use to buy and sell things with. So Samuel Butler's making points about that. He makes a point about effectively veganism, I would say, which seems a little bit on the nose, talking about how people stopped eating any kind of meat, right down to milk, not having milk because they were depriving the young, the foals or whatever, and the cows, baby cows, what do you call baby cows? Anyway, depriving them of sustenance, so it was wrong. What else was there? There was, Terminator is predicted, because the Erewhonians don't want any kind of technology. So Higgs gets in trouble because he has a pocket watch, and the pocket watch is taken from him, and put into some sort of museum, but it's always kind of held against him that he had this piece of technology, because a few hundred years before the events of this book, there was a civil war with kind of the Luddites on one side and then the technophiles on the other, and the Luddites won, they outlawed all technology because they saw that technology, whilst it wasn't necessarily damaging at that moment, they could see it would become this kind of mass controlling kind of killer robot thing. So there is an element of the Terminator in here, which I thought was interesting, but then the chapter went on too long and I started drowsing, my eyes were closing, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break here. I have to say this is one of the most expensive books I've read in the last year, because I had to have so many coffees to get through it, just to keep battling through. It should have been half as long. You look at Voltaire's Candide, half as long or less. You look at Gulliver's Travels, which does the same sort of thing, tells you the world in a different way. Gulliver's Travels was much more effective, but the reason it's much more effective is that Swift showed you instead of telling you, and you can really see the callow young man of Samuel Butler here in this book, because he keeps telling you things. He'll even translate a book that he found, a treatise about technology or veganism, or veganism itself was linked to sex and everything like that. Like, you know, people wanted meat. Somebody was caught buying meat because he couldn't get it any other way, and because everyone said, oh, no meat, meat is wrong, it's a sin, he got so upset he went and killed himself. I mean, this is a second-hand copy, and where that story comes up, I don't know if you can see that, the last person to read this got to the end of the whole chapter and just wrote, sex. Thank you. Yes, thank you for making that clear. So there was a lot here that is just a struggle compared to other books that I've read. There were some little gems. Right at the end of all of he's about to get back into the plot and the escape from Erewhon with this woman that he's fallen in love with, Arowena. That's also an issue, because there's nothing about Arowena that we learn that would make anyone fall in love with her. She's just somebody that he spent a lot of time with. It's hard to see the romantic involvement there, but anyway, I digress. The thing I liked right at the end of all of this kind of philosophizing, he says, indeed, I can see no hope for the Erewhonians till they have got to understand that reason uncorrected by instinct is as bad as instinct uncorrected by reason. And that's very much what I think. I mean, it's like you had to read the whole book to get that sentence, because it's really clever. It's this idea, you couldn't say it better. There's no point me trying to explain, is there? But here's the question. Should you read the book to get the benefit of that one sentence? I don't think so. But at the same time, if you don't read any of it, you won't get benefit from the sentence because you'll have no context. It's difficult. So, to recommend or not recommend, I have to come down on the side of not recommending this one. I'm glad that I read it. And I'm glad that I read The Way of All Flesh. But given the time again, I suppose I could have read something else by Zola, or just anything else. There's so much out there to read. So maybe read a summary. Get a summary, get somebody who quotes liberally from it, but in a more interesting manner, and that'll do you. That'll be, you can fill your cup with that. So yeah, sorry, Mr. Butler, but that one's for the gifts to people that I don't really know very well section. So there we go. So this was a much longer review than most. So the question is, what do you prefer? Do you like my 2-minute videos where I say, this is a book, this is roughly what it's about, I liked it, you should read it? Or do you like these slightly deeper dives into the content of the book? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really appreciate a bit of feedback. And as always, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. So thank you very much, and I'll see you anon.